Hey everyone, it's Dr. Justin Sung here. I'm a former medical doctor, now full-time learning coach and consultant. And this is another episode of Overrated, Underrated, where we're going to be taking a lot of different ideas and I'm going to be giving my take on them as briefly as possible. So let's go.
Okay, reading nonfiction, overrated or underrated?
Reading nonfiction overall, I'm going to say is properly rated because it's useful, but also it's not useful if you just like buy a nonfiction book, you read it, and then you assume that that knowledge is now yours. You can use it, you've integrated, you've applied the skill. Like learning and then consuming knowledge are actually not the same thing. Some people just buy books and consume it and then they're like, oh yeah, that's part of my life now. But actually, you look at the bookshelf and it's like, well, how much of that are you actually applying in your life? So in that case, it could be overrated. But a lot of people do not read very much. So therefore that will be underrated. So therefore we land in the middle at properly rated.
Listening to music while studying.
Listening to music while studying, I think, is overrated for sure. So the whole idea behind listening to music, especially classical music, is actually done through correlative studies. Like there used to be these studies that were done on like high achieving students and what they listen to, and then they listen to a lot more classical music. I think specifically there's more Beethoven or Mozart or something, but there's so much confounding in those studies that those studies have now since essentially been discredited. When you look at just purely the research around like the sensation of taking in something orally while you're listening, there doesn't seem to be any benefit of actually listening to anything or rhythmic or even like binaural beats and things. There's not really strong evidence for it. For me personally, and for what I recommend to my students, I generally just recommend having white noise. If there's anything that requires deep cognitive focus, I haven't been convinced that listening to music is beneficial for that. For doing things that don't require so much cognitive focus, then yes, definitely. Something that's a little bit more creative, something a little bit more relaxed, something where you're just kind of like going along in your workflow, that's fine. I listen to lo-fi like crazy. My Spotify wrap up for the year is always just lo-fi, 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 lo-fi. Okay, so I listen to it a lot, but I don't when I need to really focus and concentrate.
ChatGPT.
ChatGPT is extremely like the buzz. And it's probably still slightly underrated. Most people don't realize, but right now I'm sort of months into working on an artificial intelligence ML project with some big names. And I've been in this space and I've been learning about it. And then coincidentally, ChatGPT got released like in the middle of me working through that. So when I was looking through it, I was looking through a lens of, yes, an educator, but also someone that had been kind of immersed in the AI ML space for a little bit by that point. And I think the way that ChatGPT will be utilized and can be utilized is still being very, very like, you know, most people are not using it to the extent that it could be used. They're not getting the efficiency they could get. Most people probably don't have the base learning technique at a higher order to be able to use ChatGPT in the right way, because there are certain inquiry approaches that could be really effective if used in the right way. However, most people don't have a system that would allow them to use that in the first place because it's too lower order based. So for that reason, it's going to be underrated.
Cold showers.
Cold showers. I'm gonna say cold showers are overrated. And look, this is gonna be completely just purely anecdotal. Like this is not coming from me having like years of experience working with students and things like that. This is just like me thinking about it myself. I believe I am able to have good focus and productivity and, you know, manage myself and things like that. I do not need to take cold showers. And just purely anecdotally, some of the people around me that are into taking cold showers are not particularly very productive or focused. So it makes me think maybe it's like the easy thing that you can set your mind to do that kind of like, you know, can help trigger and springboard things for you. But I feel like there are probably more high yield things that you could work on that are maybe less obvious to understand as shower in cold water. So for that reason, I'm gonna say it's a little overrated, I think. I think it's hyped a little bit more than it maybe needs to be.
Khan Academy.
Khan Academy. Khan Academy is probably underrated. Khan Academy does a lot in the equity for education space. So I think most people don't know this, but I've been in the education industry for 10 years now, and my first 7 years were in the non-profit sector. In fact, I didn't even pay myself for the first 4.5 years. So I am very, very like keenly aware of the issues of like equity in education. And Khan Academy was one of the first players on the scene that actually did that at a global scale. Like Khan Academy is like an OG in the ed tech and education online learning space. No one was doing it like Khan before Khan Academy. Well, at least no one was doing it well. So I think for the impact the Khan Academy made, the road that it paved, the equity for education that it's done, and a lot of the non-profit work that Khan Academy continues to do, I'm going to say it's underrated. I don't think it gets the props that it deserves.
University.
University degrees, I think, are extremely overrated. Unless you are doing a career that literally requires that degree. So for example, like medicine, law, accounting, like financial services type thing. Like these career pathways that the entry point to it is having the degree. Outside of those, I would say that university is, I think, it's very, very overrated. I know that there are some degrees that the workplace is changing faster than the curriculum is changing. So it's like, I mean, the gap is going to be widening and widening and widening. So I remember, one of the previous marketing interns that I hired on, and they eventually became my marketing manager. They did a marketing degree, and they said that none of the stuff they learned in uni they were able to actually use at their work, and everything that they learned about marketing was just purely on the job. And I looked at their curriculum, and I could agree. The stuff was so outdated. So for example, it was a marketing degree at the time. This is like 6-7 years ago now. At the time, there was nothing about social media. Can you imagine doing a marketing degree with nothing about social media? Anyway, overall, I think universities are never going to be able to catch up fast enough. And so for some industries, I don't think it's necessary. And I think a lot of employers are wising up to that, to the point where you do not need to have the degree to have certain jobs when 5-10 years ago you used to. So if you're looking at going into university because you want to go down a career pathway, I'd recommend go and look at what the employment space is like. See, right now, today, do you actually need that degree, or can you do a Udemy course? Can you do a Coursera? Like, can you do something else without having the university part?
School teachers.
Ooh, school teachers. Well, school teachers are, like an entire group, like a massive group of people. They're not homogenous. I think that they are underrated because of the fact that most people will never really interface with education very deeply, and so they don't really know what it's like behind the scenes. And so they don't really understand the plight of a school teacher really, and what they have to kind of deal with. But having said that, if you've had a bad teacher, is that bad teacher like underrated? Well, I mean, like, no, not really, I suppose. But I think the issue is that it's very easy to become a bad teacher because the system is set up where being a good teacher is actually very hard. It takes a lot of energy and a lot of effort. So that's why they're rare. And so school teachers as a general category, I'll say that they're underrated.
Inquiry-based learning.
Inquiry-based learning is, in the present sense, the way that it's being used now, the way that it's being implemented in the real world by the vast majority of institutions, inquiry-based learning is heavily overrated, because inquiry-based learning is, first of all, does not have great evidence for it when you look at the implementation. There are a lot of variables that factor into it. Inquiry-based learning is actually one school of thought that sits within constructivist schools of education and learning, whereas the opposite is called cognitivist. And I think the best blend is the marriage of the two. Like, inquiry-based learning misses a lot of the things that are very valuable in the cognitivist space, and therefore you have these schools and people that are using inquiry-based learning and they're not getting any effect from it, and then they're wondering why, and it's because the missing ingredient might be something in the cognitive space. And that's something that I'm very passionate about, actually bringing the two together, because I think they complement each other. But that hasn't happened right now yet in the main space. When I consult schools or organizations, no one is really bringing them together. And for that reason, I'd say just inquiry-based learning by itself, the way it's implemented now, very overrated.
Regular exercise.
Regular exercise is very, very underrated. And it's underrated for more reasons than people would think. So the obvious reasons is like it keeps you healthy. Some less known reasons might be that it helps you to focus, improves your efficiency. It actually improves, there's studies that shown that aerobic exercise increases your cognitive performance as well. But the other thing is that there's something called adaptive thermogenesis, which means that even for purely thinking about exercise as a tool to like lose weight or get fit, some people will just say like, well, diet is the most important thing, and diet is important, but actually adaptive thermogenesis tells us that it's a losing game only thinking about diet, because your body gets more efficient with less calories. So it means that your metabolic rate will start going down and down and down. So if you are on a diet, you will get short-term benefit, but then eventually your body will adapt to having low calories. And so it won't be burning anymore because it's not spending as many calories to do the same type of cellular activities. And so then over time, you have to then eat less and less and less and less and less. And so then you end up eating like very, very little, and then you don't even have any energy. And now your quality of life is affected even more than it was before. So for that reason as well, I think regular exercise is underrated.
YouTube for learning.
YouTube for learning is, This is probably an interesting view because I am like an educator on YouTube, but I actually think YouTube for learning is actually overrated because it's actually very hard to teach something complex through YouTube. I'm not talking about concepts. You can create a playlist of concepts, but it's very hard to teach skills on YouTube because a lot of skill development requires like pattern identification, finding mistakes, getting feedback, like doing stuff offline with what you learned online. And from a education at scale perspective, that's really, really hard to facilitate. Like it's hard to know whether people have got the right understanding and to track it and to encourage them to do various activities and get feedback on that through a platform like YouTube. I think for declarative knowledge only, where it's just purely about just learning some concepts, YouTube is good, but I'm still saying overrated because of the fact that everyone knows you can learn everything on YouTube. Like no one's out there not knowing that you can learn things on YouTube. So people know it, but I think people overestimate how much you can learn. There are certain skills that to learn on YouTube, maybe only 2 to 3% of the population would actually really be able to learn it to that level. And that's the reason why if you want to learn, you know, Muay Thai or Jiu-Jitsu, or you want to learn to be a great violinist or a pianist or something, you're not just going on YouTube. Like the people that are able to do that and become a very good that thing are very, very, very few compared to the number of people that are doing it. And often if you are someone that is like an instructor of these things, you'll know that there are a lot of people that start learning on YouTube and they come to you and the technique is terrible. And actually they now need to like unlearn a lot of those mistakes and relearn things. So that can be quite problematic.
Social media.
Social media is super overrated. I mean, do I need to explain that? It's just like, it's really just bad for your brain, you know, honestly. Unless you're following me. In that case, that's underrated. So that's it for this episode of Overrated, Underrated. If there's anything that I mentioned that you want me to dive into in more detail, please leave a comment down below. Let me know what it is that you want me to dive into, and also specify the question about what aspect of it you want me to dive into. In the very, very first Overrated, Underrated video that we did for this, I just said leave a comment below on what you want me to expand on. People just said like the word expand on it, and I was like, what about it? So that was my fault this time. Be a little bit more specific. But anyway, thank you for watching. If you like this stuff, leave a like, leave a comment, make sure to subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.